So I did my paper on due process and how the 5th and the 14th Amendment address due process from the United States Constitution. Due process is actually like the definition is described a legal way to execute fairness. And Daniel Webster, who was a statesman back in the day, defined it as a law that hears before it condemns and which precedes an inquiry, and only after that inquiry is judgment rendered. So that's due process in a nutshell. Specifically, how the Fifth Amendment addresses it. It says, no person shall be held to answer a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand just, except on cases arising in the land or naval forces or the militia, when in actual service in time of war, public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without compensation. So that's how the Fifth Amendment addresses due process. It kind of outlines that as citizens of the American government, we're all entitled to it. And you also can't be tried for the same trial twice. There's the, I can't remember her name. There's a movie called Double Jeopardy that's about that. Anyway, denying that right is unconstitutional. And so also the 14th Amendment addresses that as well. It says all persons born of naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States, and of the state wherein they reside, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. So I know Dr. Fort Mary had said that we could turn in a due process paper or a privacy paper, and I had turned in the due process paper and worked on some of the privacy. And I know a lot of these amendments address, our previous paper, this paper, and then the privacy paper is kind of all intertwined, really. And it is a Bill of Rights. It's addressing how we as citizens have these rights, and they all kind of intertwine. And some of these cases deal with due process and also privacy, honestly. So there was a case early on, it was in 1905, called Lochner versus New York, and it was actually a case that the Supreme Court was saying that New York had regulated working hours on these bakers who wanted to work, and they thought that they were being unjustly worked just for the New York public. And so it was overturned, and it kind of can illustrate that the intent of the law was to protect, but it actually infringed on the bakers' rights to operate how they wanted to operate. So then this is actually a little bit more privacy, but I actually watched the movie Vice, and it was really had to do with some of this, was when Dick Cheney was George W. Bush's vice president, and he had a lot of health problems. He actually ended up getting a heart transplant. And I know, well, I might go down the rabbit hole, but so he ended up getting a heart transplant, but there was argument about whether or not the public should have access to his records. And, they're entitled to rights to some privacy. And so anyway, we are basically allowed to know some things, but because of the rights that we have as American citizens, we can't know everything. Let's see. This was an interesting one. It was Washington versus Glucksberg. And it was Dr. Glucksberg who was challenging the state of Washington for the legal right to assisted suicide. And the Supreme Court ended up coming to a unanimous decision that it was not in violation of a patient's right under the due process clause, because it was in violation of our nation's fundamental values. So it was overturned, and it was unanimous for the Supreme Court. They all were against him challenging the state of Washington for the right to assist suicide. So, you know, we had our previous overview forum discussion about Obamacare, and there have been several lawsuits that came out of that. And one of them was about a university that was trying to push back against having to provide their employees with health care, or their health, you know, or suffer a penalty, and that was rejected. So the court in that case maintained that the Obamacare mandates were valid. That was Liberty University versus, I believe it was the state of Virginia. So that was another court case that challenged the Obamacare Act that we had previously talked about in our overview forum. Then another case that was brought up when it came to well, you know, obviously there's the benchmark Roe versus Wade that can be looked at from all different angles as far as what amendment rights that was possibly violating. But there's the case that's Gonzalez versus Planned Parenthood from 2006, and the Supreme Court decided the constitutionality of the Partial Birth Abortion Act of 2003. It was enacted by President Bush that outlawed abortions as early as 12 to 15 weeks, and the case upheld the 14th Amendment in this particular court case, and it said that the liberty was part of a woman's decision to seek whatever method she saw fit. So, I'm trying to look at some more of the court cases, but I wanted to highlight a few of the ones that I had in my paper that were in regards to due process that's mentioned in the 5th and 14th Amendment. Obviously, healthcare changes all the time. If you're already working in healthcare, you see that, and there's going to be continued court cases to challenge some of these rights that we have as American citizens. So look forward to y'all's video uploads.